Okay, so first off, my name is John, and I work on the Hardhat team of the Nomic Foundation. I'm going to be talking today about Hardhat 3, our major new release. It's currently in beta, but it is ready for production. We'll talk you through some of the improvements you can be leveraging now, then a few tips on migrating a Hardhat 2 project across to Hardhat 3, and then some of the new features you can expect to come in the near term over the next few weeks and months. I just wanted to say a few words first on the Nomic Foundation. The entire Hardhat team is part of Nomic, but we have several projects at Nomic. We have the Slang team, which is a Solidity compiler targeting developer tools. We also have the EDR team, so that's the Ethereum development runtime, a Rust library that lets you simulate an Ethereum node. You use it every time you boot up Hardhat node. It's fair to say that EDR is, in fact, the beating heart of Hardhat 3. Nomic is a non-profit that is dedicated to improving the developer platform for Ethereum, and specifically Ethereum. We're here to make Ethereum's developers' life better. And speaking of that, let's talk about Hardhat. Hardhat is a smart contract development system, and the first commits went down about 7 years ago. It started off as basically a node task runner wrapping Salt-C, letting you deploy smart contracts into a locally running Ethereum nodes, and then adding testing capabilities in either JavaScript or TypeScript. Over the years, it expanded, adding lots of new capabilities, but we have always had a core set of principles. Hardhat is designed to be extensible. Right? That's one of the advantages of nodes. But one of the key things we have always had is a strong plugin system and API, and that has led to a flourishing ecosystem of third-party plugins. We've also concentrated on ease of use, meeting developers where they are. So whether you're developing the front end onto a smart contract system and you're dealing with some gnarly JavaScript monorepo, Hardhat works well there. On the other end of the spectrum, if you've just got a pure Solidity project and you're just trying to figure out why the contract's just reverted on you, Hardhat's there to help you parse the stack trace. And reliability, right, and stability. We take Semver seriously, and we have tried to avoid any breaking API changes between major versions. Hardhat 2's API has been solid for years. But, as the title suggests, spoilers, we've had to make some breaking changes. Hardhat 3 has needed them because the world around us has changed. Ethereum's roll-up-centric roadmap means that L2s are just part of the day-to-day experience of a Solidity developer. Node has changed significantly. It's went through its Python 2 to Python 3 moment with the switch over from CommonJS, which is what Hardhat 2 was targeting, to Ecmascript Modules, which is what Hardhat 3 targets. It's also embraced TypeScript even more tightly with all of the developer experience improvements that brings. And Solidity tooling has changed. Everyone in this room, right? We've had new frameworks with excellent new capabilities. To take as one big example, I think the community has, I was going to say congealed, but solidified around the importance of Solidity tests. Hardhat 3, then, is an answer to that changing environment, while also delivering on our principles of extensibility, ease of use, and reliability. It brings comprehensive testing support. You still have your JavaScript and TypeScript integration tests if you need them. If you have a large Mocha test suite, please bring it to the Hardhat 3 party and migrate across. But if you want to write your tests in Solidity, you now have that option. Over the last few years, we've rewritten our core simulation library, EDR, in Rust, bringing significant performance improvements. We've seen projects improve the performance of some of their test suites by 10x. And Hardhat 3 explicitly targets L2s, seeking to get very fine, more accurate simulation for currently optimism stack-based chains, but in the future, further L2s. And Hardhat has always been strong on deployments. And with Hardhat 3, we've doubled down with our Ignition smart contract deployment system. There are many other improvements, but I wanted to jump in detail. Okay? So Solidity tests. Tests written in Solidity have several advantages. If you've got an integration test coming from JavaScript, Hardhat needs to boot up a full Ethereum node. So that's the mempool, that's the JSON RPC layer. With a Solidity test, all we need to do is execute in the EVM. Solidity tests are just going to be faster. You also don't have the overhead of having to translate between two programming languages. So that's conceptual overhead, but also maybe the debugging overhead as well. We think that Solidity tests makes for a very effective unit test framework for covering smart contract logic and bringing it under test. But if you need a more complex scenario, perhaps you're wanting to run across multiple transactions, or you're wanting to emulate the network layer or the JSON RPC layer, you still have all of those options in JavaScript and TypeScript integration tests. You might recognize this code. We have intentionally brought across the structure and cheat codes of Foundry. It's a pragmatic choice. We're wanting to build on what works, but it's also an explicit design goal that a test suite written for Foundry should come across to Hardhat 3 with ideally minimal, but only small changes. As I said, we support most cheat codes, and the cheat codes that we don't support tend to be around scripting or other areas where Hardhat has a different solution. We also support fuzz testing and invariant tests as well. L2s are now a key part of Ethereum and a key part of Hardhat 3. We are aiming to give precise simulation of the network you're actually developing for. For the moment, that's limited to mainnet as before, but optimism stack-based chains. We've put in the API changes and the architectural changes will let us support further L2s in the future. Okay, so what does this look like then? Well, we've had to rework the network API in Hardhat 3. That's one of the breaking changes. In this case, what we're doing is we are making a RPC call to estimate L1 gas against an optimism network. We pull in Hardhat at the top as before, but now we're explicitly making the network connection. We're passing a named Hardhat network config, that's Hardhat hop in this case, passed in the network property, and Hardhat will read that configuration out of the Hardhat config file. So it may be saying point at a node running on Alchemy or Infura, or it might be saying run an in-memory simulation using EDR. But we also have the concept of chain type, in this case OP for optimism. What that allows us to do is provide extra TypeScript type level information. In this case, we're flowing it into the VM client library, and that sets VM up with the additional information which tells it to include optimism only RPC calls. In this case, the estimate L1 gas call. If I was to change the chain type from OP to L1, then you'd immediately see the red squiggly line of a type error against estimate L1 gas, because that's not available on mainnet. On top of the additional type information, by providing chain type is set to OP, that tells, if we're running a local node, and that tells EDR to run in optimism mode, and that will reconfigure it for different pre-deploys. It will update the, it will reconfigure it for different pre-deploys, or update the JSON RPC calls, and so on. A world where we have multiple networks is also one in which you're going to need to connect to multiple networks in some scenarios. In Hardhat 2, you were only able to create one network connection at a time per process. There were hacks and workarounds, but in Hardhat 3, because the network connection API is explicit, you can have as many connections as you need. So, to summarize, you can now have multiple connections in your scripts and in your tests. They can be targeting either L1 or L2s. And if you are targeting an optimism L2, we can give you better type checking support and more refined simulation in local development nodes. Hardhat 3 comes by default with Ignition, our smart contract deployment system. Ignition allows you to declaratively describe a complex deployment. So you describe it in TypeScript as what we call an Ignition module using the build module function here. Ignition is able to read this, build an execution plan, and then provide validations, so finding issues and errors before any transactions are submitted. It will then, if it's happy with that, take over the responsibilities for batching and sending the transactions out to the memory pool and monitoring them for success. It journals any interactions with the chain locally, giving it the ability to restart interrupted or failed deployment. So you can see the sort of thing we're talking about here, which would be, this is an Ignition module which is deploying two contracts, parent and child. You can pass in the constructor arguments, and then on the soon-to-be successfully deployed contracts, we're making an invocation of add child against the parent with the successfully deployed child contract address. Ignition has a significant feature set, things like deterministic deployments using create2, or the ability to use it for setting up test fixtures. You should give it a look. Hardhat retains its philosophy of extensibility. Right? The plugin API has changed to create ESM support, but it's as powerful as ever. We have made the call, though, to take a more batteries-included approach, so some features that were in plugins have now moved into core. One such example is code coverage. So code coverage is now built in. You just need to pass the -- coverage flag. It will give you coverage statistics on your smart contracts for both Solidity Test and for JavaScript, TypeScript integration tests. And indeed, if you run both in the same invocation, so npx hardhat test will run both sets of tests. You can run them separately. But if you run both, then the code coverage statistics will be calculated based on the merger of those two test suites. Similarly, the calculation of gas statistics in your test suite is now part of core as well. There's no need to pull in a further plugin or library. And this similarly works for both types of tests. We've significantly improved our key store. There's no more need for N files, and there's no more need for private keys in N files. The key store now will store your secrets in an encrypted file that's outside of your repository and in your home directory. If you're making a production deployment, you have the option of pulling in Hardhat Ledger. So you've got hardware wallet support for your deployment. The swap over to EDR for Ethereum node simulation, which is written in Rust, has significantly improved the speed of our JavaScript, TypeScript test suites. The test execution of Solidity Tests is on par with Foundry. But having both options lets you partition your test suites more effectively. So if you are just testing conditional logic inside of your smart contract, the obvious answer is to go for a Solidity test, and you'll get the performance advantages that that brings. I mentioned that so Hardhat 3 is production ready. Major projects have switched over already. As you might have heard at the start, I mentioned that we have the beta tag. We don't expect there to be user-facing changes, but we're keeping the beta tag until all of the functionality that the Hardhat 2 toolbox, so that's the project that you would get if you were initializing a new Hardhat 2 project, is fully covered. And we've been bringing in things like code coverage and gas statistics to cover any of the gaps that we had. We will keep that beta tag until we have it fully covered. There may also be changes in the plugins API. So I would say if you're a plugin offer, there's guides and documentation on the Hardhat website. Any changes to the API will be likely to be additions and enhancements in response to real-world requests and usage. So if you are a plugin offer, please get in touch with the team. We definitely want to hear from you, and any requests or features that you need, let us know. Okay. A few tips on migrating a Hardhat 2 project to Hardhat 3. To be clear, while Hardhat 3 has breaking changes, particularly around the plugin API, the ESMified Hardhat config that you'll require, and the new network API, those are the biggest ones. We have had an explicit design goal of trying to minimize the pain of a large existing code base moving over to Hardhat 3. Projects that have already migrated or that we're working with, investigating to see how they'll migrate, every project varies, but we're looking at developer effort at the level of days rather than weeks. But just the starting point for your migration should be the Hardhat docs. We have an extensive migration guide, so that's the best place to go. But to give you a feel for what's involved, let me try again. There we go. To give you a feel for what's involved. Obviously, inside of your package.json, you'll be bumping Hardhat and the Nomic plugins to the 3.x version range. After that, the biggest change that the first change that you're going to want to make is updating your Hardhat config file. It has to become an ESM module. If you're using TypeScript, you're probably most of the way there already, just changing the way the exports are handled. We've intentionally made it so that the config structure of your Hardhat config is as close as possible to Hardhat 2. So most of your settings and properties should come across cleanly. One place you definitely will have to make a change, though, is the way that we're handling plugins and tasks. In Hardhat 2, those were loaded automatically by side effects when you imported or required into the Hardhat config file. Under ESM and for Hardhat 3, you'll need to pull the plugins and tasks in explicitly. So as you're seeing here with the Hardhat Toolbox VM plugin, the toolboxes are collection of batteries included Nomic extensions, which will give you an excellent starting feature set. The largest change, however, is likely to be in your test suite. Previously, as I mentioned, the network was created explicitly, as you can see here at the top. So the RPC call against provider is just automatically creating a connection in the background. In Hardhat 3, those connections are now done explicitly. That allows you to have as many connections as you need and to set things like chain type if you want to. Creating the connections explicitly means you will need to make some decisions around your test suites, specifically around isolation. So how your tests will run against, or how isolated your tests will be for against an Ethereum node. So do you want it so that the entire test suite runs against a single instance of the Ethereum node, or do you want it that all of the tests in a single file runs against the Ethereum node, or maybe you want isolation at the test level? That's a decision for each project themselves to make, and it's a trade-off between performance, ease of use, and testing isolation. So let it be upon each project's own head for whatever they decide. But with that decision made, while there'll be many files that need to be updated, we've found in practice that the migration is, after that decision, while it's repetitive, it is a mechanical process and relatively straightforward. Hardhat 3 provides a base we're going to continue building on. What features are coming, though, in the near future, so over the next few weeks and months? Gas statistics, as I said, are available today. But gas snapshots, so that's the ability to run a test and capture the gas usage in a stored file, then take that as a baseline against which changes to the contracts and subsequent test runs can be compared. That gives you an excellent regression test and is particularly useful in your CI. We want to add gas snapshots. We're going to bring across Hardhat Viper to Hardhat 3. So any projects which are using Viper as part of their smart contract system will be able to take advantage of Hardhat 3. We'll have nodes, but we also love Bun. We have projects which are already successfully running with Bun support. We want to confirm that the complete feature set of Hardhat and its combinations will work successfully with Bun before we give it the full stamp of approval. But that's something that we hope to do in the near future. And more performance, right? Hardhat 3 is faster, but we're not going to rest on our laurels. EDR delivered, in some cases, 10x performance improvements in our JavaScript and TypeScript integration test suites. In test execution, as I said, Solidity Tests is on par with Foundry. However, we have identified improvements we can make within our build pipeline. So we will continue making performance improvements based on real-world usage and projects. Hardhat 3 delivers on our principles of extensibility, ease of use, and reliability, while improving performance, adding Solidity Tests, and taking Hardhat multi-chain. There are many other improvements as well, so I'd say give it a go. The best starting point is our docs. They've recently been completely revamped, so take a look again if you've not looked at them recently, and tell us what you think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for walking us through all of the updates. We have quite a few questions to go through here. I will start with the first one. Any plan to help devs automatically mock standard bridges protocols between multiple chains?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Any plan to help developers automatically mock standard bridges protocols between multiple chains?
Standard what protocols, sorry?
Bridges.
Bridges and protocols. Okay. So, straightforward answer is no, or not in our immediate future. Those sorts of complicated scenarios where, I should say, our L2 simulation, we're assuming that you're spinning up one node. We're not simulating the interactions, definitely not at the Hardhat level, between the L2 and the L1, which I think those sorts of scenarios would imply. That's not to say you might not be able to get yourself quite close yourself. And that's definitely, it's something we want to explore, but it's not on the immediate roadmap.
Are you embracing VM in favor of ethers in Hardhat 3? Which one do you think pairs better with the new updates?
Okay. So if you initialize a new Hardhat project, you'll be given the option of either an ethers Mocha stack or a node test VM stack. By default, if you don't make any other choices, you will get the node test and VM stack. VM is an excellent client library, and we really like the way that it embraces the enhancements that TypeScript enables and the better type handling. However, just to be clear, we will continue supporting both Mocha and ethers enthusiastically. So if you have a large test suite, you do not need to worry. You will be able to migrate that across, and we will be supporting that throughout the lifetime of Hardhat 3.
Do you support custom deployment factory in Hardhat Ignition for deterministic deployment of contracts?
No. But that is on our roadmap, and that's something we definitely want to see. Sorry, for everyone's clarity. Sorry, I can click, but I'm not going to go through all those. I'm going to assume you roughly remember the ignition module that was described before with several contracts. One of the things that ignition allows you to do is to use an alternate strategy of create2, which instead of using a deployment transaction, the ignition will make a call against the createx contract factory as it's deployed out on the particular chain you're targeting. And so you'll get a deterministic deployment. Right now, Ignition only supports createx. We have had many, many requests for using alternate factories. That is something we definitely want to see improved, and that's on our roadmap.
One
so
last question.
Not yet, but that's one we want to see solved soon.
Thanks. One last question. How much support does Hardhat 3 provide for testing ERC 4337 account abstraction? Can it simulate a bundler?
So this one's more of the EDR team, but I think the answer is that right now we are not providing all of the support that you would need. And there are further changes that we would have to add into ETR before we get that. I'm going to look at the audience now for members of the EDR team, and you can either nod yes or no if I've got that, if I've misspoken. That was maybe. I'm going to say yes. Okay.
That will be all for today. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.